tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is RBLR Sports, and I am your usual host, James Knowles, coming at you for the Rowdies show. Now, as you may or may not know, Carlos Rueda, my usual co-host, he is away in Qatar watching the World Cup. He is there to do it. So to fill in for him this week, we have, what did you say, Matt? I guess you are a U substitute this week now?
I think that's what it counts at. But Dan, you sound really different this week. I don't know what's going on. Where's the theme song? This isn't even Wednesday. What are we doing?
Yes, we have Matt, the unused substitute, usually. But today he is filling in and helping us out. So thank you for joining us, Matt. We usually start this by asking how you're doing. So I will do the same here and say, how is your week going?
So it's Thanksgiving break. I'm off from work all week. I'm not even really sure exactly what day it is. So I think I'm doing okay. But yeah, there's no alarm. There's like nothing to do. It's just, yeah, I'm okay, I guess.
Well, that's good to hear. It's better than not doing okay. My two roommates are also teachers, and they're on break. I think they're going back to their respective parents' houses this upcoming day. But I am a little hoarse. If anyone listening couldn't already tell, I had, let's say, 1 or 2 beers at the USA game yesterday, and we'll leave it at that.
Just 1 or 2. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. So last week we put out our World Cup preview for the tournament, which did start on Sunday. Ecuador played on Sunday and got a win out of it, 2-0 over the host Qatar. So congratulations to them and Carlos, who got to be there with a nice big Rowdies flag I saw. The USMNT played yesterday. They drew 1-1 against Wales in what was a very disappointing draw. I think it was on Ted Lasso where I heard somebody say that the coach Ted Lasso is learning the game, and he found out that this is a Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds quote. I am not quoting Ted Lasso. This is Welcome to Wrexham, where they say they learned that there are both ties that feel like wins and ties that feel like losses, and this was definitely the latter yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the FIFA rankings, the ELO ratings, like these two teams are pretty evenly matched, and ending up in a draw at the end of 90 minutes is not probably a bad result. But having watched, this in the first half, and it made me think a lot about the USMNT teams from previous World Cups, where they would go into a game like that. They scored early, like the Dempsey and Donovan teams. They would have ridden that one out and gotten a 1-0 result. So it definitely is a draw that feels like a loss, even though a draw is probably the most likely result going into that game. But after that first half, I mean, I thought they played really well in the first half, but I thought in the second half you saw some of the inexperience, especially from the head coach, Greg Berhalter, where he was not really prepared to counter the changes that Wales did at halftime. And Wales did the changes, and Wales plays as a really good group. And they were able to stay in it, and a boneheaded foul from Walker Zimmerman, which a lot of people seem to be writing off as an indictment of MLS as a league. And I don't know it so much about that as it's just a dumb play in a World Cup game that, there's a lot more attention on it. But this Friday got even bigger. And then now you're talking about like goal difference next Monday when you play Iran. It's going to be an interesting couple days to see if and how they're going to get out of this group.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the how as opposed to the if, but we're gonna have to see how it goes in a couple of days, as you said. And I don't know if my lungs are going to be able to take it, or I might end up sounding even worse than this somehow. Mexico also played their first game. That was earlier today. It was a 0-0 draw with Poland, so they ended up in the same kind of result as us, and at least didn't get a loss. That is a good way to start. Now, Matt, you and I, instead of talking about the World Cup, we are going to switch back to the Rowdies. I think that everybody here at RBLR, possibly you guys with Unused, wanted to take some time after the season and just, contemplate what happened, give it some thought. We wanted to take a week off from that. We did our World Cup preview, and now I think we have a better it's not as emotionally stinging as when we had just lost, obviously. So I think that time off gave us enough time to process, and we are ready this week to do our 2022 season preview or review. And that is going to be where we start today. So Matt, we're going to get into all that, but do you have, like, just before we get started, one grand thesis or anything along those lines?
I think it was a good overall performance on the year for the Rowdies to get back to the Eastern Conference Final. We knew coming into this season that it was going to be a very different team than we've seen the last 2 years, where they really dominated the East and got extremely unlucky in 2 straight finals appearances. Gosh, yeah, a third straight matchup against Louisville City in the playoffs twice in a row now in the Eastern Conference Finals, or I guess 3 times in a row Eastern Conference Finals. It just kind of felt like, this was going to be the chance. And the longer that game went on, we're going to do it. They go down, Louisville goes down a man, and you're like, oh, this is it. It's going to happen. And it just, we know that it didn't. And we saw what happened to Louisville going on into the next season. I mean, the next game. I thought they did pretty well, probably better than maybe I thought they would have, considering how they started the season, the injuries they dealt with, the other things they dealt with. But it still hurts a little bit, though, to go out in the final like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a pretty good summary, actually. I think that it definitely hurts despite everything that we went through to get there. But yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit more. Beforehand, I just want to say, please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports, of course, and like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Now, I think that we were going to start with breaking the season up into manageable parts. It was pretty easy last year, the way that we did this, to break it up month by month. And I think that it kind of broke down roughly the same this year. There are a couple that go, spill over a little more than a month, but it was pretty good. So I'm going to go through that here, and just interrupt me and let me know if you have anything to say in particular about one of these bits. And then after that, we'll do our lowlights, our highlights, our takeaways, all of that good stuff. So let's get into the actual season. Before April, it was a pretty good start. We had 3 draws and 2 wins, not necessarily what you want, but also no losses. It was a 0-0 draw away to Oakland Roots, which was one of our more interesting games out there. I remember that the field was weird as hell, and I don't know if it was the draw that we really deserved, but it was good enough. It got us a point, obviously. And then, unfortunately, after that, we got into the month of April, the no good, blah, 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 horrible month of April. It started with a 6-0 win versus the Villages in the Open Cup. So, I actually start feeling pretty good. But then after that, it kind of went terribly. So we had only one other win that whole month at home versus Tulsa. And then we lost as well in that month I believe it was a home loss to the Miami. And then we lost away to Orlando City. In the Open Cup, we lost at home versus San Diego, and then we drew away to the New York Red Bulls too. That was not a good month, Matt. I think that one of the hardest ones was the Orlando City defeat, and that was pretty rough being in the stands there, actually standing next to you, no less. But that was pretty bad, and that's despite a loss at home versus San Diego that I think we were leading at one point, and a draw away to New York Red Bulls too.
I was actually already getting a little bit nervous at this point in the season, because the last few years we've seen the Rowdies typically run out and have a really good start to the season. I mean, they've gone, in past season, they've gone 12, 13 games before not winning or drawing before they lose a game at all. And to kind of stutter a little bit in here, I remember that Miami game. I was at a wedding. I showed up for like the last 10 minutes. I think Miami had just scored in that one. And just saw some of the parts that were a little concerning at that point. The Open Cup stuff with the Villages in Orlando City was it was a mixed bag. I mean, on one hand, Lucky M. Kosana still finishes as like co-Golden Boot for the tournament based off that Villages game alone.
Yep.
And I think, did he score it in the Orlando game too? He got one back near the
I
end.
I don't remember if it was lucky or not, actually, offhand, but I can probably pull that up.
But I just love that based off those 2 games alone, he's like co-golden boot for the tournament. And yeah, the Orlando one was tough. It was always going to be tough. I loved being able to go to that game, getting on the bus with everybody, taking a day off of work and going over there. I ended up back there again for the Open Cup final when Sacramento came to town. I ended up hanging out with those guys. So I spent more time in Exploria Stadium than I would ever usually voluntarily choose to, but the people I got to go with were pretty good. And I saw Neil Collins every time I went to that stadium. That's another story that if we have time later, I might share that one a little bit. But yeah, to me, this is looking at some of the results here. This is where we lost the chance to host the Eastern Conference final, to me, because
I think so.
not getting an equalizer against Miami, blowing that game to San Diego, and then somehow drawing Red Bulls 2. It wasn't awful. It wasn't like the end of a season right there, but it just felt different than the last few seasons.
No, I think that's right. It did feel different. The game against San Diego was a real gut punch. I mean, going away to New York Red Bulls 2 and drawing is like, okay, that's a fluke. At least we kept a point out of it, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, when we were up against San Diego and then ended up losing that game, that was really rough. And I think that the Open Cup loss to Orlando City was so hard. At least for me, I did not go with you guys on the bus, but I had to drive after work through that terrible Orlando traffic and get there. Everybody that I know from Orlando City was, relatively good. And I did meet a friend over there, but it was still obviously a very tense atmosphere. And especially on the field, Neil Collins was sent off and would go on to refuse to fully leave the playing area. So you could tell just how much emotion went into that game. And then to give up the goal or to give up the game and the point and the chance to move on further in the Open Cup, that really sucked. And yeah, the fact that Orlando City obviously went to win it, I think that actually is just another little kick in the gut for it. But I guess a lot of people probably will have tuned out by then, from our side at least.
Yeah, so we, at least speaking for the people on the bus, we had an interesting time getting to the stadium. At first, we were going to be dropped off like a block away. Then all of a sudden, on the way there, they called ahead and said, actually, we're going to have to drop you off right in front of the stadium. We're going to come on and ticket you guys on the bus because there have been so many people, and I honestly believe like 98% of it is just people trying to be funny online, but they're like, oh yeah, there's been lots of stuff said and lots of people saying that they're going to do this and do that. So we were they parked us right in front of the entrance to the stadium and did like a tunnel for us to walk through in there. And it was just it was a little bit silly, but it was a little bit fun. And then at the end, we had to wait for the bus driver to wake up and come around. So we were
oh no
stuck on the steps out front of the stadium while some of their fans were at a gas station across the street yelling something that couldn't be heard because they were so far away and they're so freaking quiet anyway.
Yeah.
We had a good time on the front steps with their security, who was telling us how much they hate their home fans anyway, and that we seemed like a lot more fun. So it didn't get the win on the field, but we had a good time overall. So I quite enjoyed that. I will definitely go back in the future. My highlight, I think, for that game overall was having the USL Super League president in the stands with us, chanting, doing Rowdies songs and singing with us for the entire match. It was a good time.
Yeah, I think that is something that's good to point out in amongst the misery of the month of April. So that was April, and let's now move on to the next month, which is of course May. 2 games in May, only 2 games. After a very packed month in April, I don't understand the scheduling here. It's very weird, but we had a 5-1 away win to Phoenix, which I thought was pretty good at the time. We didn't really know then that Phoenix was, kind of bad. So I liked that part of it. And then a 3-1 win at home versus Pittsburgh Riverhounds. And those seemed at the moment like pretty statement wins. I thought that we were, kind of riding high after what seemed like such a weak performance leading into that month.
Yeah, I don't think we knew how bad Phoenix actually was, but we knew something was up with them as well. But still, I'll take a 5-1 win over Phoenix, especially away, because lots of talk about who would have won what in the final that never was, but having
Exactly.
beaten here and then beaten them there, I think we've completely put that to rest. Although I'm sure we'll end up playing them again next year now that Juan Guerra is there coaching, and the schedule is probably going to be very weird also too. Yeah, the 2 games in the whole month was odd. I don't know if they were kind of expecting that we were going to beat Orlando and they were giving us some time for another Open Cup match or something. I don't know. In hindsight, the Pittsburgh game probably more significant than the Phoenix one in terms of getting a quality win over what would turn out to be an actual playoff caliber team as opposed to Phoenix. But I think we all were kind of focused on that Phoenix win back then. It felt really good.
Yeah, it did. It definitely did. I think, as you said, it put a lot of arguments to rest, at least for the time being. Who knows what it's going to look like in the future, but I did like that at the time. June went a little weird. It was a draw, win, win, draw, win. So, not terrible. Obviously, no losses in there. And that was included revenge away to the Miami. We beat them down in, I don't know, whichever college stadium they call home. And we also beat Louisville City. So, that was good. Obviously, those are 2 important wins, and I think that anytime that you can beat Louisville City, whether or not it's away, this was a home game. But yeah, I definitely like the chance to do that, and it didn't obviously lead to the way that the rest of the season would go playing Louisville City, something that we're going to get into a little bit more later. But yeah, I think that it seemed like we were in a good place, and it obviously led into a good place in July, but. Do you remember any specific moments from, say, the Miami game, the Louisville City game, or any of the other months, or any of the other games from June?
I mean, I'm honestly drawing a total blank on the Miami game, but it could just be that I'm picturing their stands at home. Because I believe that was an away game for Tampa Bay. The Louisville game, I remember it. I was there because it just was another one of those. Because I think it was 1-0 off a penalty, wasn't it? And even the penalty was a little dodgy, whether that was really a penalty or not. But it was one of those like, hey, we're gonna take it because we have enough that we feel don't go our way.
Right.
Especially we're gonna get to it. I think coming up in the next month or two in the review. The Colorado Springs result, in which the referee was just anointed as the USL Referee of the Year, despite missing. The Colorado Springs player punching the ball out in the box, whatever. It was just one of those like that. That was an important win to get over Louisville City because that was going to have significance down the road. At that point in time, it felt like one of those, we could end up second, we could end up third. Wherever we get to, if we can get to a spot where we have a home game to start the playoffs, it feels like we'll get that run and play Louisville again in the final. And this could go a long way to determining where that game's going to be.
Yeah, I like the point you made about the penalties, because I think that there was a string of maybe 3 or 4 episodes in a row where Carlos and I were talking about it, and we were like, okay, so there was a missed penalty in that game next week. Okay, so there was a missed penalty in that game, and the next week. So yeah, as you said, whenever you do get one, even if it's a little iffy, go ahead and take it, and don't feel too bad about it. You're gonna be just fine, and I'm sure make up for it with the USL refereeing at some point along the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that was the month of June, and we will move on now to probably the best part of the season. Well, actually, that's not true. We will get to the best part of the season. This was, in fact, what we thought was the best part of the season at the time, but it turned out to be the second best. July was 5 wins in a row, and that wasn't too bad a run. Obviously, we beat Detroit 1-0 at home in early August as well. So, that's when we started to feel a lot more confident. Now, we did have a dip after this, and we got back into winning. So I don't think that it was by itself the best part of the season. But afterwards, I remember feeling, we had these away games coming up, which are going to be important. And this is one that you mentioned, Colorado Springs, and then also the away game to Louisville City. Those were coming up at this point, and going into them, I felt super confident because we had done so well here. It was just such a good month. And, that was despite obviously the heat in July that we were able to do this. I thought that we were, kind of sitting pretty here. And this was despite also a couple of injuries at the time.
Yeah, the last couple of years, it seems like we have this kind of summer swoon in like July and August, and we start dropping, 2 or 3 in a row, or a couple losses in a draw, and we didn't really hit that big streak. There was, 2 losses and a win, and then another, maybe another 2 losses. Uh, so it kind of felt like maybe the getting out to a little bit of a slow start, comparatively speaking, wasn't going to be that big of a deal because we made up for it there, and we started getting some of the like we get a win and someone else we needed to lose drops a game, or we get a draw and someone else we needed to lose drops a game. It was one of those, like, we were getting the results at the same time other people were getting the results we needed them to get to. And it kind of felt like things were starting to click really well.
Yeah, absolutely. But then unfortunately the wheels did fall off just a little bit to follow that win against Detroit City that we had at home. We had 2 losses in a row. They were away, unfortunately, to Louisville City and Colorado Springs, just as you had mentioned previously, where both of these games I felt were, among our poorer displays over the course of the season. But against Colorado Springs, we did have an obvious shout for a penalty that was let go. And Neil Collins was pretty upset about that. I remember that at the time.
Oh yeah.
So we could have at least, yeah,
I
could have at least got a point out of that one.
Yeah, and that's one of those, when you look at those on the schedule and you look at the standings, like losing, 1-0 to Louisville away, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Then, you kind of watch the game and you see the errors, the throw in, and then the kind of, playing weird on the ball, at least it led to that goal. You kind of feel bad about that. And then, like, Colorado Springs, I think, was second or third in the West for most of the year. It's hard to tell because I think San Antonio wrapped up the Western Conference like 3 games in. But it was one of those, like, you factor in the travel, you factor in, playing at the altitude, playing this team who is really good. I mean, they had they still had the league's leading scorer on the team at that point. And he was still, even though he got sold and was gone for months, was still in contention for, I think it was either young player or MVP or one of those. It's just is. You wouldn't feel bad if someone told you, hey, you're going to travel there and lose this game, but then you watch the way it happens and you kind of feel bad about it. Yeah. It's kind of like watching the U.S. Wales game. Like, oh, they finished 1-1 and Gareth Bale scored a goal. Okay, that's going to happen. But, oh, man, after that first half and then the way the second half goes, it does feel like points dropped in that situation.
Exactly. That's a very good way to put it, and an unfortunately apt comparison, I will say. After those 2 losses, we did get 2 wins at home. Those were Orange County and Las Vegas, so not too bad, obviously, a turnaround there. But unfortunately, to complete this weird little stretch before October started, we had 2 more away losses, and these were one of these was pretty rough in terms of the opponent. One of these was pretty rough in terms of how the game went. The first one was to Charleston Battery. Now, Charleston Battery this season were among the worst teams in the East that weren't an MLS reserve team. And that was a real tough one to swallow, because I think Carlos and I both predicted like pretty good wins. I don't know what you might have predicted for that one, Matt, but I think that we were saying, we're going to beat them, we're going to shut them out. We just have to see by how many, and then we go and lose. And then against Detroit City, we hold them until very late in the game when, unfortunately, a former Rowdy actually scored against us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The hauntings continue, which tends to happen from time to time. Yeah, the Charleston game, I don't remember exactly what I predicted, but I had no doubt in my mind that was going to be a win. But it seems like we're always good for 1 or 2 really poor results, especially away during the season. So I think I had a little weird feeling going into that one, but it was still like, come on, we've won like 6-0 there in the past. I remember Lucky scoring a goal like 4 seconds in there previously. Their season was already done, and it's still, it was weird. Detroit City, like, I'm not totally shocked by that. They were a very, very good team coming into their first year of really competing at this level, performing as an organization at this level, and I thought they did very well. And what I think they got the last or next to last playoff spot and got into the playoffs. You kind of got the vibe from them going through the season. That's about what they were going to do, and it wasn't really a surprise. They were one of the better second half teams all year. And we that's kind of been our thing this year is, and it's kind of weird. We are the team that scored the most goals in the league. and the only team I think over 70 goals on the season, and we had this stretch where it's like, oh man, we're still 0-0 with 75, 80 minutes to go, and if we haven't scored them early and often, we got really prone to giving them up late, it seemed like.
Yeah, and that obviously came back to bite us, as we will mention later on. But yeah, that game against Detroit, I think that we were, I think that I was personally feeling more optimistic. The game went on that we would at least get a point out of it. But yeah, I think that was really a really rough way to end things. Naturally, you never want to lose, but especially not like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was definitely like a weird. It was a weird patch because we had these two losses to Charleston and Detroit City, and then at home we drew versus Birmingham Legion. Now Birmingham Legion is another team that made it into the playoffs, but at home that's a game that you really want to win. It felt again like points lost, and it was something that we unfortunately this accumulation of lost points really came back to bite us at some point late, once we got to the playoffs of the season.
Yeah, I mean, some of these points would have been the difference between third place and second place, between guaranteeing a home game, 2 home games in the playoffs, which turns out we didn't really need that to get to the conference final, but sure will have made things a lot easier probably.
It would have made things a lot easier, and Louisville City were definitely out ahead, but who's to say with all of these points that we dropped, if we had kept up a little better, maybe we would have put them under a little bit more pressure as the season went on. I'm not, who can say how it would have gone? We have the history that exists, of course, but it's just an interesting thing to think about. But after that, luckily, Matt, we did have what actually turned out to be the best stretch of the season, and that was the month of October. There were yet another 5 wins in this month. We beat Monterey Bay away in what turned out to be a pretty controversial game in the end. We beat Loudoun United by a score of 8-0. That included not only some really well taken goals, but it was really fun to see, just because I was like, I can't believe, it's Loudoun United, of course, but right. Scoring 8 is just wild. And then we had 2 more home wins before the playoffs started, and we won the first game there against the Miami. But before we get into the playoffs, what do you remember specifically about the month of October, even if it's, just individual goals out of that 8-0 performance?
I remember first off being legit worried about that Monterey Bay game, because I think it was the last playoff, like the last trip out west in the regular season. It was a startup team. They looked like they had a pretty good I watched a couple of the games. They had a pretty good setup. They had them decent crowds out there. I was worried about the travel. They seemed to be a pretty good team, kind of mid-table Western Conference team. I was a little concerned that this was going to be not like a trap game, because I think, like you said, Loudoun was like the next week or whatever. But it's just one of those, like, it just felt weird. But to go out there and get the win, and there's all the other stuff that we can talk about later. But just in terms of the result, I felt that was a good result. The Loudoun game was, I mean, I've been going to the Rowdies games since they started playing again in 2010 up at Steinbrenner, and I've not seen a game like that. I'm a row or 2 behind the goal in the mob section for this, and it's just, I think I ducked 2 or 3 times on shots because I thought they were going to come through the back of the net at me. It was something else. And we spent a lot of the time kind of heckling their keeper and coming up with creative things to say to him. But I do honestly believe he looks like he kind of eats a corn dog with a knife and fork. But I just felt bad for that kid at the end, because he just, he's kicking the post. He's throwing the water bottle. I think he kicked the ball into the stands at one point. It's just, aren't they gone after this year? Like they're gone to the MLS. Like,
if I'm not mistaken, only one team that is an MLS reserve team will be staying in USL, and I'm pretty sure it is Loudoun United.
I know I read United that DC United was going to have a team in the MLS league, and it was kind of unclear whether that was going to be a separate team they were going to operate, or if they were moving Loudoun, because I just, can we play them every season at least? I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I can't say that I follow the MLS Next Pro division or whatever their name is with their weird font, but
Yes.
if that is the case, yeah, if that is the case, it makes sense that Loudoun United would at least stay around here. And yeah, that poor kid in net, that is a good point. He actually was signed by DC United to be their third keeper for this upcoming season. I do know that much. But it was certainly not off the back of that game. He's acquitted himself well for Loudoun, but that day I think every one of their players had a failing grade, as failing as they can get. But yeah, after that we moved into the playoffs starting late in October. That was when we beat up on the Miami at home, so that was obviously fun to watch. And then unfortunately, Matt, because of our placement, the next two games we had to go away and we scraped past Memphis 901. It was it was among the closest of margins that we've had to get a win. And then we unfortunately could not keep that up, and we could not scrape our way past Louisville City. They beat us in Louisville, and yeah, that ended our season before Louisville went and ended their own season by losing.
I honestly kind of wonder, and it seems weird to think about this in some respects because there's at least a week off in between these playoff games. But the emotions that they getting to that result in Memphis, you almost kind of wonder, especially watching them come out against Louisville, like were they just spent and unable to recover physically, emotionally, whatever from that Memphis game because that last you know whatever it was, 10 minutes or so of stoppage time. Feels like we got the preview of World Cup stoppage time there.
No kidding.
That situation with the dueling penalties and it just seems like that game took something out of them because it just didn't seem like they had. I don't want to say they came out flat, but they did not. They weren't able to match Louisville's readiness to play. It felt like the next week.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo that actually. What I felt going into, like I said, October, obviously, very good month for us. We did so well leading into it. I thought that we were looking great. And we had the game against the Miami. We were pretty solid throughout that one. I don't think that, they really gave us all that much trouble. But then, unfortunately, it did keep up with the rest of the season in the away games where I don't think, the game against Memphis, I don't think we actually looked that good. And it's entirely possible afterwards that the emotional toll that you're referring to, we weren't really able to get up for the Louisville game either. I don't think that we looked particularly good in either of those away games. And it's just that one of them we were able to somehow, just steal a goal effectively while Phil Breno played out of his mind for a couple minutes there and saved our bacon.
Well, and I remember watching a previous game, and I talked to guys like Mike Watts and Devin Kerr a lot, and Devin's real high on Neil Collins' ability as a coach, especially his ability to make halftime adjustments. So I remember getting to halftime of the Memphis game with 0-0 and thinking, okay, cool. We kind of had them where we wanted. Like we weren't great in the first half, but Neil's going to do something in the second half and it's going to pay off, even if it, is the last 5-10 minutes or so of the game. And it's what ends up happening, but it's one of those, you can do that against a Memphis or you can do that against a Miami, but I don't think you can do that against a Louisville. You've got to come out and kind of hit Louisville right away. It's a different level. And it's a level where we have been in the past. And I think this year, I don't think we were at the same level, whether that's due to some of the lineup changes, personnel changes on the roster, whether that's due to, events going on during the season, whether it's due to, 3,007 injuries. It wasn't the same. And I'm not surprised by what happened in Louisville as much as it was disappointing. And I know it was disappointing for the players too. But I still think overall the season was a success because this is about where in my head was get it back to the conference final should be a success based on what we have versus what we did last year. What happens in this offseason and going in the next season is going to be a really interesting thing to watch, though, I think.
Yes. As we have seen, it is very important to get your signings right. It is very important to nail the offseason. And yeah, I'm just as interested as you are to, hopeful also that we are able to kind of keep it up at the same rate. But that was roughly how the season went. And now, Matt, I want to turn us over to kind of lowlights and highlights here. And I compiled some of these. Tell me if I'm missing anything, obviously, or tell me if you want to expand on any of these too. For lowlights, I want to start off with the month of April. I've already said this. We talked about it at the time that we went over it, but losing to Orlando City, being there, that was rough. I told producer Eureka, because we were recording the time after that game and we did the review together. I had a big, so at my company, somebody that I work with had a leprechaun hat, like a not 4th of July, excuse me. What am I saying? A St. Patrick's Day hat. And it was, tall. It had the buckle on it. So I cut the buckle off and it's just a big green hat. I taped yellow around it, and okay, now I have a Rowdies hat. Whoop-de-doo there, and great artwork from me. I wore that to the Orlando City game, and my now fiance and we had to walk back through the Orlando City crowd because we did not go to the bus like you guys, which was probably a little smarter. So we're getting our jibes, we're getting our jokes at us, and that's all fair. Most people were kind enough about it. Some people were singing, "Oh, tell me, Rowdies, how does it feel?" And that's I guess deserved, but it's not fun. The thing that happened that really stood out was somebody grabbed the hat off my head and ran off with it, and I was like, I didn't really want to turn around and, I don't know, kick the guy and try and while he's running to trip him or something like that. Right. So I can grab the hat back. It wasn't worth it at this point. I got a free felt hat and put some tape on it, but it was just weird that somebody would steal something off your person. I thought that kind of summed up the month of April in a very personal way, I guess.
Sounds like typical Orlando. They at least for once, at least I guess, like I said, just be thankful that a teenager didn't get punched in the face this time. It's baby steps.
Yeah.
We
were talking about that. You and I were talking about that and how bad it was previously at that venue.
So yeah, to me, the overall, like that one wasn't as much of a low light to me because it wasn't completely unexpected. And I've been to so many Rowdies Orlando games that have turned out like this. And it's just one of those, like, one of these days is going to be the first time, and I'm going to be there, and that's going to make up for all of this. Is what I keep telling myself. And it's, feels like, maybe now a little bit closer than we have been in the past, but I tell you what, I felt worse going there for the Open Cup final and watching them pull like 3 goals in the last 7 minutes to beat Sacramento, while I was standing and singing with the Sacramento fans after having pre-gamed with the Sacramento fans and running into Neil Collins on the way to the stadium. I felt worse after that one than honestly our game, just because for me, and from having done this for all these years, it's the overall experience, the bus ride there, the bus ride back, all of the banter with their fans, accidentally leaving a sticker or 2 on their front door of the stadium, among other places. Just the game is obviously the reason why it's there, but so much about that was so much fun that night that it was I don't say it's worth it, but it balances out, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good thing to point out when we're in the middle of this. I do think that we were extremely close when it came to that game. I think that we did very well, and as you said, I think actually maybe the Sacramento one was worse because they had held them for a while, and then unfortunately Dan Casey, who was a very good defender for a lot of the year, he had 2 slip-ups in very quick succession for Sacramento, and that kind of threw the game away. But that is a good way to keep things in perspective. So maybe we'll put that on the mid-lights list as opposed to the low-lights list.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I ended up going home with about 7 Sacramento scarves. So if you guys are interested in one, I've got several sitting around.
All right, well, there we go. I could add to my scarf collection. I've got a large bag of mostly Scottish jerseys and scarves, but I'm always looking to add more to that.
Well, as the grandson of a young man from Edinburgh, we can certainly make a trade here, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right, so my next or low light, I should say, not highlight. The next one that I had listed here was an unfortunate one because I was very high on this player coming in from last season, and I thought that he didn't get quite enough time because Evan Loro was just so good. But Rico Rosarena did get his chance this past year, and unfortunately, he really didn't cut it when he was given that chance, and ultimately, he was shipped out on loan to Forward Madison, where we could bring in Phil Breno, who also did very well when he was given his chance, but that kind of sucked for me. I love Rico Rosarena as a guy. Like he's got his brother here as well playing for the Tampa Bay Rays, so it's obviously cool to have him around. And he went this past year off of the back of the Forward Madison play, and he ended up making his debut for the Cuban national team. So I'm happy for him there. But seeing him kind of fail to make the grade with our team was it was rough. I stood up for him after the Orange County loss in the final last year because I don't think any of those goals were his fault. I still don't think that, but you definitely can't argue that the goals that he gave up here, his record was not very good. And I'm going to look that up real fast, Matt. I'm going to turn it over to you for a second.
Yeah, I also thought he got way too much stick for the result in the Cup final from last year against Orange County. Even if there may have been one goal that I think maybe he could have done better on, but there are also saves he made that I don't think Evan Loro makes because I don't think he has the reach to get there, especially a couple of ones that were top corner shots.
Right.
And for him to come in with, the like little amount of time he had to train as the starting goalkeeper. I felt too much blame was put on him because I think he was kind of an easy scapegoat. I was glad to see him get this chance this year, but yeah, and I still like him. I think he's got potential. I thought the loan actually was really good because he went to Madison where he got to play. And Madison, they didn't make the playoffs. They weren't great. They lost a bunch of games, but I know that he made an impression there. He got to play not only League Two teams, but also they had some international friendlies. They brought in teams from Central and South America, at least one. I know he got to play against, and I know he had some good results. I think it was a good loan. It's one of those rare loans where it kind of works out for everybody because Phil Breno comes in, and honestly, Phil came in looking to kind of get training in and probably make a move back to a USL Championship team for next year. Ends up getting pressed in the service when CJ Cochran goes down injured, and is the reason why the Rowdies get to the Eastern Conference final, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So, he had to put himself out there. And I guess from the looks and sounds of things, tracking him on social media, it doesn't seem like he's going to be returning next year. Maybe CJ is going to be back since Oklahoma City is still going to be on hiatus. We have to see how the injury goes. But Rico seems like a guy who still needs some more seasoning. It's one of those where I wish we kind of had a B team or a U23 or something like that.
Yeah.
He gets some regular play. Because I think at some point part of it's confidence with him. And he's a guy who's not scared to come out, who's not scared to get off the line and take some chances. And it seemed to work out for him sometimes in Madison, but a couple of times not so great. But it's one of those, like, you can't necessarily do that all the time at the USL Championship level. I don't know that I would toss him out right now. Like, I don't know if I would cut him or trade him or whatever, but I don't think he's the answer heading into next year as a starting goalkeeper either.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I had my stat sheet ready here, and I wanted to pull up the statistics for when we got to this point. And looking at it, we had CJ Cochran and Rico Rosarena start for the most part for this season until Phil Breno had to come in for injury, just as you said. And when you look at the appearances and the goals conceded, it's a little interesting. CJ Cochran ended up making 25 appearances, and in that time, he conceded 22 goals. Not that bad overall. He had 5 clean sheets in that time. Now, Rico Rosarena had 4 games that he started. Unfortunately, he conceded 8 goals, and he had no clean sheets. So I think that those numbers kind of speak for themselves, unfortunately, there.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the interesting things they're going to address is, number one, what are they going to do with Rico? And number two, if he's not going to be the starter, and I don't believe that he should be, then what are they going to do with that position?
Yes, exactly. We will have to just see, and I'm hopeful that CJ Cochran might be not only injured not injured but available for us coming up. So
Right.
the next low light that I had lined up here was something that actually turned it around. But for a while, Sebastian Guenzati was having a very rough season. He was not even getting onto the field as a substitute relatively frequently. There were, long stretches for the beginning of the season where we didn't see him. He certainly wasn't starting, but he wasn't even getting game time for a while. And for someone who has done what he has done for this club, who ultimately went on to do what he did towards the end of the season, it was
Mhm.
rough to see as well. And I did not like, obviously you got to do what's best for the team at the moment. That is what sports are. But God, it was hard to see, and I felt really bad. I felt really bad for him, and it obviously wasn't helping the team in terms of getting the goals that we needed. But yeah, it was just a bad point for this season.
Yeah, he's had spells like this in the past, and Neil's kind of thing has been to drop him, and that's always been a fairly successful motivator to get him back on track. And this year, I mean, between Leo Fernandez having like 3 career seasons at once, and also
Yeah.
Jake LaCava proving to be one of the better loan moves ever made, uh, at least for the beginning first half of the season, then it was one of those where even if he was doing it in practice, he wasn't really getting the chance to get out there in the field. I mean, there's a there's a distinct possibility that when they start making some moves that what if they hold on to Tejada because he's younger and send Seba off to Indy instead? Like I felt like that was definitely a possibility, and I didn't want to see that happen because he's done so much for this team and has done so much for the fans and loves being here and good Lord, I just wanted him to get the record.
Yeah.
We joked on our show when CJ got hurt and Phil came in. That's when Seba started playing again because Seba was the emergency keeper. If something had happened to Phil and while Reiko was still out on loan, Seba was going to be the guy going between the pipes. So they would have him out there for the game. So it wasn't like you'd have to sub him in and burn a sub when that happened. You'd have to burn a sub to replace, someone at forward, I guess, in that situation. But I kind of joked that this is what's going to help him play himself into form. And honestly, I kind of
Yeah.
think it did. And I'm glad it did because that's another thing that got us kind of on a stable footing for the last part of the season and into the playoffs and felt like that. So I was glad for Seba. He's been one of my all-time favorite guys to watch here. I get to usually end up down on the field for the last half of stoppage time or so, and I usually get a chance to talk to him first minutes after the game when he's coming off the pitch, and it's just I know he was relieved. I know he was glad to do it, but he was glad that he was able to do that for the fans to get the record because it was important to him, but he knew how important it was to all of us too. So just he's a good guy and he deserves everything that he gets and honestly deserves more. And I was glad to see it work out in the long run.
Yeah, he will definitely be that moment, the record breaking moment will definitely be touched on again in this show. But yeah, it is important to note that he was starting low and he did turn it around. So that is obviously a good point in his favor. Another unfortunate low light for me were just the number of injuries that we had. Dalgard was out for a while. We had Jake Arman out for a while. Thomas Van Kaziel actually never came back from his injury over the course of the season. Robert Castellanos went down in the very first game. And I don't think
Yep.
we got him back until was it September or something like that? It was very late.
Mid to
And
late September. Yeah.
yeah, I think Steven Dos Santos also had another injury for a while, like last season. It was very tough to see, and that forced Neil's hand in a lot of ways. I think that they carry a relatively small squad, and I think it was you guys who mentioned this. I think I was listening to your last episode, and you guys were talking about how the Rowdies do tend to carry a smallish team. But they are also putting a lot of money into refurbishing their literal team infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably one of the reasons why we have a smallish team, but with all these injuries, it can sometimes come back to bite us.
They for years have run with a small roster. I was trying to look up today and see, I forget what it is, what the actual roster limit is, but I think it's somewhere around 30. But we frequently will go into a season with 22 or 23, and it's Neil's like, these are the guys I'm going to play. Some of them are going to play more than others. I'm not going to sign guys and just have them sitting on the bench to maybe show up once in a while in a cup game or something like that. Like, everybody at some point is going to get on the field, and it gives you good competition in training, and it gives you good competition for the 18 on match day. But I'm always worried what's going to happen when like 6 guys get injured, because that seems to happen every year too. And we go through stretches where guys are injured, or guys, get yellow card accumulations, or someone gets a red card. And it's just the depth seems to come back to bite us sometimes. And I'm always like, could we have like 2 more guys? Could you maybe get like just one more at every position? Just maybe one more. I'm hoping the new training facility and getting to work on that grass out there, which I believe is going to be the same stuff they have at Al Lang instead of the pitch and the turf they've used at the USF field, is going to be a benefit. But the injury thing has been through multiple trainers, multiple athletic, sports science staff, whatever you want to call it. It just seems to always happen that way, which is why I'm always like, let's have another guy or two. Let's have another guy or two. Yeah. Like, even coming to the playoffs, we kept hearing that, there might be a keeper coming on loan and this and that. And I was like, oh no, we got Ryko. We're going to go with Ryko. I'm like, okay. Cross your fingers if Phil stays healthy, please.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I think that it was good that we were able to sign all of the guys that we ultimately did, like Van Kaziel. Ian Antley came in as a backup, just in case. He didn't play that much, but he was there. But yeah, definitely starting the season. I was of a similar opinion. I was like, this just seems a little small for getting through a whole season, and it kind of did turn out to be that way. Another low light I had here, actually, I'm going to do these together because it was pretty much in the same vein. Our away losses to Colorado Springs and Louisville City were very poor performances. Did not like even watching how those games went. As you've already said, it was, nothing to lose there. Okay, you kind of expect that, but to not really show up as much as you have been, especially in the games prior to it, that was rough. And then the losses to Charleston and Detroit City right before drawing at home versus Birmingham Legion. These are all not only, not great performances, but they are sucks on our points total. And that is where it really, really hurt us. We could have had at least, the home game against Memphis in the playoff if we had gotten, 2 more points over the course of that time?
Yeah, there's, it's hard to point at one single one and say, well, here's it. There were so many ones where a point here, a point there, 2 points, whatever, could have made all the difference, not only between getting that second home playoff game, but, potentially even getting level with Louisville. And like you said, maybe putting them under more pressure as the season goes on. Maybe they slip up, maybe they make a mistake somewhere, and we end up hosting the whole thing at home. We host that Eastern Conference final at home. I'm convinced it's a different story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we've seen obviously how we do, especially this past season versus most of these teams at home. We were able to get the result that we wanted. But yeah, I think that our away form definitely did suffer this year for whatever reason. Going into the playoffs, there was a bit of a low light that I think we were probably going to have to revisit at some point in the future, because none of us really knows exactly what happened, I don't think. But the game against Monterey Bay, we did win it. It was not without scandal, because there were accusations of a racist gesture, I believe it ultimately came out to be, against Lawrence Wyke. And he was originally suspended for 12 games. Then that was rescinded, and he played the next game after the suspension. So it was a very weird moment. And, online, I think that the Rowdies came off, I don't know, without knowing what happened, it's very hard to say. I think that the Rowdies said that they support their player because they know he isn't a racist and did not do anything racist, or at least did not intend anything racist. I think their first statement started out a little tone deaf. It came back a little bit better, I guess, but it's very hard to say. I think that we were all pretty unequivocal in saying that he needs to go if there was a racist gesture. And then when it came out that maybe it wasn't this, it was just very hard. And I counted that as a pretty rough patch of the, just the emotional state of the fandom, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up having conversations with people in the front office about the situation, and even with the information they told me, it's still one of those, well, it's not completely clear. The one thing they did say to me, and I saw this echoed in one of their statements, was if there had been any, if it was clear, if it was concrete, if he, yeah, I did it, then he would have been gone, before the league had even said anything, which I want to believe is true. I want to believe they would do the right thing. And to me, that would be the right thing to do. I know myself personally, when I saw USL come out and say it's a 12-game suspension, it's the largest suspension they've ever handed out in this situation, that I was like, well, they must have something.
Right. That's exactly how I felt.
Going to do this without having photo or video evidence, or teammates saying, yeah, this is what he said, or him even admitting to it. Not to compare the situations because they are different situations, but what was it, a year or two before, Junior Flemings has his incident with San Diego, where he's like, yeah, I said it. And there's, multiple bits of evidence to prove that he said it, like that you could go back to and say, and he got a 10-game suspension. And it was just kind of like, well, if you got 12, you must have had something equivalent to, or bigger than that. And then to turn out that, there isn't, not only was there not evidence, but it's one of those, the lack of evidence doesn't prove that something didn't happen. There, it was it was a crappy situation. We definitely, divided the fan base a little bit online, and saw that happen, there. And I don't know that anybody on any side of this handled it great, whether it was Rowdies, especially the league. I think the league really botched this, and in a situation where they could have set some kind of precedent for the future, and to maybe lay down, kind of an example of this is what will happen, to totally screw it up like this, and just kind of, whenever there's going to be future allegations, and let's face it, there's going to be future allegations. This is pro sports in America. It's just going to create more doubt and uncertainty and a lack of trust in the process and in the people involved because of how this was all handled. And that I felt was really poor also.
I can only agree with all of that. Yep, it was bad. I didn't actually mention, there was a division with fans online. People were, saying that, if you have allegations, then they need to be concrete, or you're just damaging a player's reputation. There were people who were like, okay, well, it's, worse to damage somebody by calling them a racial slur, or, whatever the case may be. But it was, God, that was very tough. At this point, we're still working on seeing who might be around next season in terms of their contract situation or not. RBLR is still working on that. We said that we would be, and we're going to get that out at some point, but we just need to find all the information that we can.
Right.
We don't know what Lawrence Wyke will be doing next year at this point, but yeah, it was all very, very interesting to watch, and not in a good way.
No, and another thing that really bothers me about the whole situation is the kind of the person that needs the most attention here is the Monterey Bay player, who I don't feel intentionally made a false allegation. I believe that something happened,
Certainly
and his
not.
interpretation of it, caused harm to him, and that has kind of been overlooked in all of this, which really sucks. We know that they as a team did some measures in some of their remaining fixtures to kind of try and keep him at the forefront and kind of centered in all this the way that I think he should be. And then that's another shame to this situation is that's been kind of brushed aside at this point too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely important to point out. And unfortunately, I don't think anybody did the right way. No. The last low light that I had here was not comparable in terms of the types of emotions that were involved, but definitely very bad emotions in the end. Unfortunately, with Louisville City in the Eastern Conference Final, we were away, as we have mentioned multiple times at this point, but we were doing pretty well, actually, in terms of a game that I don't think that it was our best game, but we were doing well enough to, stay in it. I don't think that Louisville City had any major chances. They were certainly knocking on the door, but, nothing crazy. Then we went up a man. because Corbin Bone got a little silly and got himself a red card that was really stupid. We were at that point doing much better. We were leading, in a way, we were leading our way into that game like we had not up until the red card when we went up a man. And I assumed at that point that, okay, well, we have to win this game. We are the ones knocking on the door. We are the ones who look like we're about to score. And unfortunately, we gave up a very crappy goal to Louisville City off of a corner. I think it was one of the scrappier goals I'll ever see, but that was all that they needed. And unfortunately, we did not have an answer for them. And that was really rough, because I thought for us to have survived as long as we did, for us to have gone up a man and actually started to turn the screws on them. I was leaning into, I was with with RBLR's producer Eureka at the bar in St. Pete. We were at Kurgan's, and I said, this we have to do it now. We are there. We are pushing them. There's no way that we can't win this game. And then unfortunately, I was wrong with that.
Yeah, I was at the Shamrock down in Sarasota with Skyway Casuals, and I actually had to step out after the first extra time to go pick up my daughter from a birthday party. And I was like, well, I'm going to go pick up my 14-year-old and bring her back to the bar because I got to watch the rest of this game. Confident in the fact that, at some point while I was out, that we were going to score, being up a man, having a guy like Corbin Bone sent off. I just felt ultimately, something was going to happen, and it was going to be something weird like last year again. And I picked her up, and we got back to the bar like literally about 30 seconds after Louisville scored. And man, just heartbreak. But Louisville deserved that result. And on the balance of that game, I cannot complain about that one bit. We had so many chances, and we just didn't have. Like, I hate to do the whole they wanted it more thing, but they wanted it more. They really did.
Yeah, I don't think that is an incorrect summary. It did suck under the circumstances, but yeah, Louisville City did do what they needed, and that wasn't just, that was well before they got a man sent off. Afterwards, they did well enough to, still keep our chances, not keep our chances completely off the board. We did start racking up some chances, but it was nothing serious. It was nothing where we were like, oh, that was so close. We're almost there. But yeah, it was very difficult to watch with everything that went into those final 10 minutes. And yeah, I felt pretty bad afterwards. It did take a little bit to get over that one, but
yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. I think that we should leave it there with the lowlights. I think that covers just about everything. And I will take a second here, Matt, just to ask everyone listening. Obviously, liking and subscribing is free, but possibly if you do want to support the podcast a little bit more, you can check out our shop. We are shop.rblrsports.com, and you can just look at all of the designs that we have going on over there. There will be a link in the description, and you can use the promo code 10% for 10% off. That is COYR. So please do check that out. And we've got a lot of stuff there that I think people will like, just because it is done not only by our producer Eureka, but it is pretty cool. So with that out of the way, Matt, I would like to do our highlights. We can probably get through these relatively quickly because I think that some of them are a little silly. They were my highlights for the season, but if you got anything to say, please do so. The one that I wanted to start with was traveling up to Alabama to watch the first game of the season. It was a 1-1 draw, but my sister coaches up there. Well, actually now she is in Mississippi, but she was previously coaching in Alabama. So we went and we hung out with her, and we got a pretty nice Airbnb. It was cool out, which I really like personally. And it was great to see. We went over there. I think that we were very one among very few, if any, who were in the green and gold up there. I think that we were getting a lot of stares and a lot of dirty looks, especially for how loud the couple of us that were there were being. But it was a very good time, and I enjoyed that a lot. So that was a fun one. Another highlight was beating up on Phoenix. We have already touched on this, but we didn't really know what Phoenix was looking like at the time. As you said, something might be up, but maybe not, not even making the playoffs, Phoenix. And it was really good to go out there and get a 5-1 win away from home, turn off some of those arguments that Phoenix fans might have been moaning about online. I really enjoyed the way that went.
Yeah, I was big. I didn't get to do any big road trips other than the Orlando Open Cup game this year, but those are always usually a highlight. I've gone to Charlotte, I've gone to Jacksonville, I've gone to Fort Lauderdale, I've gone to Gosh, I don't know. Lots of places, but those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope to obviously get in on a lot more of those in the future. Another highlight was the month of October. It turned into a win fest. It was beautiful for us to watch the games at home or those games that were not at home, and we got to see them on TV. It was a great time. I hope that we get to do just a couple more months like that at the very least. Another good highlight that I really wanted to hit on. This is something that we have already talked about because it was part of the lowlights, but Sebastian Guenzati did come back into form over the course of this season. And not only did he do that, but Matt, he took the overall scoring record with a very nice game against Loudoun United. He actually scored 2 that day. One of them was a what would we call that? A half volley scissor kick. It was very nice, and God, that was great to see.
And if you watch him, he tries to hit that scissor kick so many times during the year, and to convert on that is great. It was either the goal where he tied the record or the goal where he broke it. There's a great picture of him just kind of running along the fans right behind the goal. And I'm slightly visible in the picture, but my daughter's going nuts. And then Kenny Morales from Spectrum Sports is down there with us going nuts. It's one of those, like, I'm getting a high quality print of that to frame and put up in my house because it's just one of it's a great memory. Like, it was one of those, I'm going to take my kid to this game, and she hadn't gotten to go to a bunch, and just oh God, the look on her face, the look on Seba's face, just looking at that picture and remembering exactly how I felt in that moment is something that probably my highlight of the season, if I'm going to be honest.
Okay, highlight of the season. I think actually that's a very good shout for highlight of the season. Yeah, I was elated at the time. I mean, it means a lot to the fans, but I think that Sebastian Guenzati, obviously, any player wants everything that they can get, and to be the leading scorer for a team overall, that is a very cool record to have, and especially at this level where players don't necessarily stay at one team for a very long time. And Sebastian Guenzati really wanted that. And when he was able to celebrate with the fans, God, you could see how much it meant to him too. It was on his face. I mean, he wasn't crying or anything, but he was so emotional, and it was awesome to see. Awesome to see.
It definitely meant a lot to him. You could tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like that shout for highlight of the year when we consider how the whole thing went overall. The next highlight that I had was actually the introduction of some youngsters here. Most especially for me was Tate Johnson, who came on and played a couple of games, not just one or two, but was actually pretty involved. He got his first start for the Rowdies, and he got an assist off of a goal that I think Lucky Mkosana scored. So he looked not just like, a kid who was making his debut. He looked like he was somebody that was, on the team because they were just a player. He deserved it. He earned that, and he earned it with his play. You could see it when he was out there. I thought that was really cool. And if the Rowdies do end up signing him as a full player, the way that MLS has homegrown contracts, I would not be shocked, and I would also not be upset about it.
Yeah, he definitely looked like he belonged there, and I was glad to see him get in and get a chance to play, and have heard about other games where he was in consideration to be on the bench if something happened. Well, I mean, for example, the Miami playoff game at home, he was a checkup on Lewis Hilton away from being on the bench for that game. If Lewis wasn't able to go, then he would have. Someone else would have come in. I think it was Dalgard was going to come in for him, and then he would have been on the bench, and would have felt fine with him being there because he showed that he had that ability. And then that's one of those, heading into the way this league is going to be set up next year with all these MLS 2 teams going, you're not going to be able to stack your roster with, some, borderline guys that you can put in for games like that. Like, the games are going to be more competitive. But Tate's a kid that feels like he could fit in there and play if he was needed to. So I'm glad to see that kind of that pipeline developing where we can have these academy kids come through and play not just in an Open Cup game against the Villages, but in a league match where it has actual significance on the season.
Absolutely, and left back is a team of need, a spot of need for most teams. So, having someone who's so capable at that position also is pretty good in and of itself. The next highlight that I had here is something that I think It's going to stand out to most people just because it's kind of obvious. But Leo Fernandez had a lot of goals this year. He had a lot of nice goals this year. He had a lot of important goals this year. And Matt, it led to him winning the MVP for the season overall. And I mean, obviously he deserves it. I mean, we are Rowdies fans. I think that, we're going to stick up for the Rowdies player, but there really, I don't think was an argument that anybody was as important to their individual team any more than Leo Fernandez. He did extremely important plays, extremely important goals and assists, and he fully deserves it. I think it was 19 goals overall and 9 assists, if I'm not mistaken. And if you're doing that for a team that makes the conference final, you're almost guaranteed to win the MVP, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem admitting my biases and that I look at everything through my green and gold glasses. But when the finalists came out for the MVP, it was Leo Fernandez versus a guy who didn't convert his penalty for Memphis against the Rowdies in the playoffs, and then a guy who I don't think was even actually in the league anymore. So it just seemed like that's a fairly easy choice to make. I think it was well deserved. He had. I don't want to say it came out of nowhere because we know how good Leo Fernandez is, but he hasn't had this kind of season before for Tampa Bay. So to be able to do that, especially when, like Jake LaCava with a hot start and kind of cooled off a little bit. Seba took a long time getting untracked this season. For Leo to be able to step up like that, and there were so many games where, Dos Santos is hurt, Tejada is traded. Everyone knows that if there's going to be any offense, it's going to be Leo Fernandez, and he keeps doing it. That to me is what kind of made him stand out above the others. Like, he was the really only option in a lot of these cases, and he still got it done.
Yeah, and I think that this also has a lot to do with the positional changeup for Leo Fernandez. I don't know in the offseason if he played his way into this positional switch or if it was because Neil Collins brought in a player like Jake Araman, and they also had Tate Johnson in the wings, but he moved into an attacking position from his left wing back that he played a lot last year. And boy, did he ever run with it. He was allowed effectively to go wherever he wanted on the field. And, it's something that we see for the U.S. men's national team. We see Christian Pulisic do it. He tries to get the ball wherever he can. And, they call it hero ball sometimes, and he ends up not succeeding with it. Leo Fernandez actually went out there and did it. Like, he was the hero ball, and he succeeded. It was awesome to see this positional creativity and flexibility. But I'm hoping that he will obviously, continue this into the future. And I'm hoping that he can keep it up, because that is such an asset to have when you have somebody who is dangerous, no matter what the game is, no matter what the circumstances are.
Right.
The only weird Leo Fernandez thing I have for this whole year was just, him being subbed in the final against Louisville City. I didn't understand that at the time because he was such a danger man all season. And it was good to see, at least for, how well he did for this team, that he got the MVP.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was really important, I think, for not only the Rowdies team, but all of us fans as well. The next one that I had, obvious highlight, everybody's going to know it. Phil Breno making the penalty save against Memphis in the Eastern Conference final, or the Eastern Conference semifinal, obviously. Aaron Malloy is he is deadly from penalties. And for us to have given, I thought it was a weird call. I'll just say that now, but whatever. We're obviously past it. And for them to step up here, and I'm like, there's no way that we can go out, end the season on this weird play that doesn't make any sense. And actually, we didn't. Aaron Malloy was stuffed, and that was right after Phil Breno had made a very nice save, like 5 minutes beforehand, pushing it off a very nice shot from their winger Laurent Kisidou. And yeah, it was so good for him to do that. I think that the other thing was the emotional aspect of it, because he said that this was something related to his grandfather, where his grandfather had passed away, and I believe it was his grandfather's birthday that he made that save. So it was wild to be able to celebrate that. And then Leo Fernandez goes and gets a penalty to win us the game afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what I said to the TV after Phil made that save, but I said some words. to the point where even my daughter was like, "Really?" Because
Yeah,
I didn't call.
I might have done something pretty similar to that, I will admit. Those were most of my highlights. My last one here is just a little bit silly because I didn't actually watch the game, but Louisville City losing in the final is something that I wanted to mention because it is nicer in my some people I guess like having lost to the team that won it all. I guess that's not my point of view. I kind of like that our rivals lost it personally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know why they played an interconference friendly right after the title game anyway. When they routed Louisville, but more power to them. No, and it's the only thing I feel bad about is that I still legitimately believe that the Eastern Conference, top to bottom, is stronger than the Western Conference. I mean, San Antonio ran away with the West this year, to where it wasn't even close between them and the teams behind them, and I kind of feel like they maybe had a little easier path to getting to the final. Whereas what whoever comes out of the East has to go through, and we've seen it the last couple years, they just kind of seem to not have the juice anymore. And I feel bad for him because I think it leads to this false narrative of like Western Conference dominance when I don't know that's necessarily the case. And results are results, and that's what ultimately counts. But just I would like to see the Eastern Conference get one at some point because I believe that the talent is there. I did have one other highlight I'm just going to throw in here real quick. The fact that Corbin Bones' career was ended by Lewis Hilton baiting him into a red card, so he misses the USL Cup final. Nothing nothing particularly that I have against Corbin Bone, but just that's insane. Like that whole sequence is just it's peak Lawrence Hilton. Or peak Lewis Hilton. Gosh, I'm getting all confused here now. Peak Lewis Hilton, but you can't. And even I thought the call was a little iffy call, but you can't do that right in front of the referee. You can't put your hands in the vicinity of someone's face right in front of the referee and expect you're going to get away with it. And God, yeah, I thought that was incredible.
Yeah, I think the fact that he didn't really put up much of a fight when the guy pulled out his red card, I think that kind of summed it up for Corbin Bone. It was a stupid move, and
Right.
I'm a little bit giddy about where it was.
Like even
But
if you thought that it wasn't warranted, like he knew he wasn't going to win that argument, so just stop.
exactly. That's exactly right. So that will
Plus,
do it for the highlights then. Just to get into
one other thing I learned today, the referee in that game was the same referee who missed the handball in the Colorado Springs game. So I guess we can say it's even.
All right. Well, there you go. There you go. So that will do it for the highlights, and we'll move into our quick takeaways here. We're going long, but Matt, you are obviously an honored guest with all of the years that you have spent covering the Rowdies. So we're happy to have you on. But we have some, we still want to do some takeaways from this season, and I had a couple here that I wanted to go over with you. Obviously, we talked about this. Starting off with the smallish roster definitely did come back to bite us. And along those lines, when it comes to roster decisions, I wanted to ask you about this takeaway here that I had. Sebastian Guinzotti, legend that he is, obviously, he did not turn out to be the most reliable guy up top this past season. Obviously, that was unfortunate. And my question is, with the smallest roster that we tend to keep, what are we doing, do you think, in terms of the guys who might be getting up there in age? And are we sure that we can rely on them anymore? Is this going to happen to a player like Leo Fernandez? We not necessarily. I'm not saying that he's going to turn into this next year, but what do we? These are things that the coaching staff has to take into consideration. So, what is your overall takeaway there?
I have a feeling, and this is one of those things where I'm going to say I don't have any inside information. Nothing's been said to me by anybody, any players or any staff or anything. I have a feeling we are going to see a lot of change in the offseason because it felt like we had a roster that was, half very experienced and half, kind of been with the team for a year or two, and there wasn't a whole lot in between. And I think we're going to see a lot of guys move on. Look, we know Seba was brought back this year to get the record. And on the basis of the year he had last year. But Seba last year was basically Leo this year. So I think it's going to be in their heads. These guys are similarly aged. Seba has the background of coming off a pretty severe knee injury before he came to Tampa Bay. But I think it's going to be in their heads is, could this happen to Leo this year? Was
right.
Leo's season a result of where he was played and how he was allowed to play this year, will that replicate next year? I think it's going to be on their mind. So I think we're going to see a lot of guys move on. But I don't think it's going to be a total reboot. I don't think. I mean, I suspect we're going to see Leo Fernandez back, but they are going to have to go out and bring in some new players, some younger players, some fresh faces, and knowing Neil Collins, just how he's worked in the past, because he's been doing this job with or without the title of technical director for several years now already. It would not surprise me if there are, 2 or 3 guys who are already signed anyway. I know going back to the first time that the Rowdies lost to Louisville when it was in the opening round of the playoffs, they went to, and was still when Louisville played at Slugger Field, they went to that game, lost. They were back. I remember being back at Owl Lang the next day because they were doing like a haunted house there, and I took my kid there, and Neil shows up with his kids, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we've already got 2 or 3 guys signed like a month ago." And that was like, one of them was Lewis Hilton. Like there will be signings made already, I'm sure, and then we'll start hearing about them soon. I mean, I guess we'll get the news about who's moving on first, and then we'll start talking about who's coming in. But even though they've been kind of radio silent there, and you've got Norwich City coming in and training, and they're posting pictures of Aaron Guillen and Raiko Rosarena out there training with them. I suspect their moves have been made already, and we'll start hearing some. Maybe we're going to get another guy on loan from Norwich again this year. It would not be a horrible thing. They seem to kind of be playing this partnership up again, where it's been kind of quiet the last few years. So we'll see. I kind of hope that's going to be something that's going to happen, because I think, we came into last year with our starting goalkeeper being a guy on loan, with one of our top defenders to start the season being a guy on loan. I think we're going to see them using this loan system some more. I have a feeling, and we'll see how that works out.
I know that Norwich City do have an American youngster who is a central defender that needs minutes. So if there is a team needing, maybe it is us. But
maybe we can get Josh Sargent while we're at it too.
Hey, if he's down, I wouldn't mind having another redhead around. That would be pretty cool. But that is one thing that I think is important. And one of my thoughts was, obviously Sebastian Guenzati had the season that he did, and then he had this season. Leo Fernandez, it exactly as you said, that's going to be something on their minds. Another takeaway that I had here was just, teams are obviously going to have injury problems periodically. That was us this past year, and we had them the year before and the year before, I'm sure, but all of this is something that happens. What is really weird, though, is the USL schedule. That's also been the case previously, but these midweek games, I just don't understand it. It's not like we only played 2 games in the month of May. It's like, why do we have to bunch them all up in April and then, really spread them out over the month of May? Let's just make it a little easier on teams. And especially when the US Open Cup is, coinciding with that for almost all the teams in the USL. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know which ones I hate more, like the Wednesday games or like the Sunday games. So I don't know. We've had a season or two where it's like, hey, everything's on a Saturday. It's like, okay. But next year is going to look weird already. We kind of talked about it in our show before we wrapped up for the season. But Oklahoma City not going to be back this year. Starting to look like Queensboro is not actually going to enter the league this year, if at all. We're going to see some teams. How are they going to do the schedule? Because we were at 32 games this year. I don't think they want to cut games, having already started to sell season tickets for next year. But also, I don't want us to end up with a schedule where like we see certain teams in the East 3 times, but I don't want that unbalanced thing. I don't know if we're going to end up with more interconference games with the Western Conference, how that's going to work out. But it seems like we're going to have kind of a net fewer teams next year than we did this year. It's going to be interesting to see how the scheduling computer sets this up. I still want after spending the better part of an evening and really super late night with some of them, and then into the next day with some of the Sacramento fans. I'm really hoping we get a rowdy Sacramento game, preferably at Owl Lang, because I don't want to go anywhere. because that's a fun group. They will travel, and they are a lot of fun to hang out with, at least before and after a game.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would definitely like to have that same problem, let's say.
Yeah.
Another takeaway that I had here is just, dropping these stupid points against teams like Charleston, New York, Red Bulls, Legion. This is stuff that we can't really do in the future if we want to maintain our high levels. And that comes down, I think, also to things that we've already touched on, which are the injuries, which are the scheduling. All of these are issues, of course. But with all of that being said, the Rowdies are going to need to make a number of good signings this season if they want to make up the gap that they obviously established between 2021 and 2022. This is something that you have just said, and something that I had written down that I wanted us to go into a little bit more depth here, because my question for you, Matt, based on what you've seen over all the years that you've been covering the Rowdies now, the Rowdies got to the USL Championship in 2020, and unfortunately they were unable to play it, obviously. As we all know, in 2021, they made it to the final, and unfortunately, they did lose to Orange County. And this past season, as most people listening will be aware, we lost to Louisville in the Eastern Conference final. Does it seem to you, is it possible that maybe some of the top players that we have look at other teams around the league and they say, okay, well, San Antonio has just gone and won this. Are they possibly a more attractive destination? Phoenix is going to do a rebuild, and Charleston are obviously going to do a rebuild as well with someone that a lot of Rowdies players are going to be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be a possible thing? Are there players on our team who might even be getting looks from leagues elsewhere? I don't know if the USL Championship is comparable necessarily to the leagues in Brazil or Argentina, but let's say Chile. I don't know if there's a league there possibly. Maybe there is a comparable team in Colombia that might be looking at these. I'm not sure what the options are. Probably not MLS. We can say that pretty definitively, but there are definitely going to be things out there. Is that potentially a problem for us as a team that unfortunately hasn't, quite done that next step?
I mean, I could see a guy like Aaron Guillen getting a lot of interest from MLS teams, and now we know Evan Loro got signed and is starting to make his way back in with Cincinnati. I think there's definitely a path there, but I think there's probably some interest from some of these overseas teams too. I'm not so worried as much about losing players to other teams in USL, and I think that's one of the maybe positives about having a smaller roster is there is playing time to be had here. And I think organizationally, the Rowdies are probably one of the top 2 or 3 overall in the league. I think Louisville's really good. Some of the issues they're dealing with aside, I think organizationally they're relatively stable if they can sort out the mess they're dealing with right now.
Sure.
It comes down to money. Is someone going to come along and start spending crazy money? Like maybe Phoenix, they just got the vote passed by their city council to relocate their stadium closer to, I guess, like basically downtown Phoenix, and
so not the desert.
Yeah, not a porta-fort out in the desert somewhere. Looks like I can see them wanting to spend the money to rebuild and kind of get back where they are, and I think Juan Guerra is going to be a good coach ultimately. Charleston just brought in the coach of the year, Ben Perman from Memphis, who I think it took him a little while to get to that point, but he did a lot of good in Memphis, and he's a guy who's he was one of Detroit City's original head coaches. I don't remember if he was like the original or the second head coach, but he's a guy who's familiar with kind of lower level soccer in the U.S., but I also don't know what kind of assets Charleston's owners are going to put into this other than signing some of the players. I think the Rowdies are still an attractive place to come, especially with the new training facility. And it looks like now with the new deal to keep playing at Al Lang for the next few years, I believe the next step is going to be replacing the pitch, enhancing the drainage underneath. It's still going to be one of the top places to play in the league. And then you've got the whole Florida thing about no state income tax. And I think the stability here is part of the package, having a guy like Neil Collins here, having this connection with Norwich City. And you've seen guys go from here to play in other leagues and at other levels, that I think it's still an attractive place. So I still think we're more focused on bringing guys in than who's going to move somewhere else. And if Neil wants to make a move, the Rays have shown that they will make a move. Like,
Yeah.
I know when the Tejada trade went down, they had just given him an extension in the offseason, and Neil was like, "Hey, I want to trade this guy." And I know that the people of the Rays were like, "Are you sure?" Like, if you want to, it's cool, but are you sure that's a move you want to do? Because you seemed pretty high on the guy. And he's like, "Yeah, we gotta improve elsewhere," and brought in a guy like Nicky Law, who was a big piece, I think, for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So he'll go make a move if he wants to, and the Rays have, as far as I can tell, and as far as I've heard from everybody everywhere, have always backed him and said, "Okay, you're the soccer guys. You take care of this. We'll do what needs to be done." So I'm interested to see. I think this is going to be the first big rebuild. As far as we're going to see a lot more going and coming than this offseason and previous seasons, but I also maybe wouldn't necessarily be so surprised if we see some familiar faces return. And again, I say this without having been told anything by anyone, but I know Forrest Lasso's season in Sweden didn't go quite well. Possibility
Right.
he could be available again. I know he really enjoyed playing here compared to some of other stops in MLS or USL. That, gosh, if he's out there, do you go make a deal and bring him back in? And I know I'm gonna step on this a little bit here because it's coming up next, but Robert Castellanos released by Nashville. I would have no problem having him return next year. Can you
Certainly
imagine
not.
a back line where you had, maybe you end up going back to a back four and you've got Lasso and Castellanos in the back, and whoever you're going to have back there as fullbacks? Like, it could be insane. Like, there's not a lot that has to be done to get back to that level. It's going to be interesting to see how they go about it. I'm
Yeah.
really kind of interested in seeing this.
Yeah, I think coming into this year, I was under the impression that the 2021 roster was still a better roster overall, but it will definitely, as you said, it's not that far off. It's not something that is going to take while it's not going to be a year where there's turnover at teams and they their turnover year, and you can remember, oh, they did very poorly then. I don't think that's going to be the case for the Rowdies, even if it is a turnover year. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
It's kind of funny. It feels like we're sitting here talking about this like this is the team that, lost 3 of their last 4 and didn't make the playoffs,
Right.
but instead of a team that lost 1-0 in the Eastern Conference Final. But it's like, yeah, there's some moves that they can make, and it's just gonna be a lot of fun to watch. I'm eager for it to get started. Let me just say that. Like,
yeah,
the World Cup's great, even though it's a weird one coming at a weird time of year and everything else associated with it. I'm like, can I get some roster news for my second division American team, please? Can I just get that? Can you?
Yeah, if there were any overlap with those 2 bits of news, that would be one thing.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, I'm off all week. Can you give me some news? Can you tell me something?
Yeah, I would certainly not hate it in the middle of all of these games. That would be a nice little soccer distraction from the soccer.
Right.
But that will do it for our takeaways as well. And our last segment here, our extra time segment, it did start with the Robert Castellanos news. As you said, he is released by Nashville. Where's he going to go? Who knows at this point? I definitely would not dislike having him around. He's a good player. It would be good to have him over, a consistent season and not 1 game and then 2 months. that would be interesting, but we're going to have to see how it goes, of course. The next point that I wanted to mention is our usual co-host Carlos Rueda is not here, and if you missed it either last week or at the beginning of this episode, it is because he is in Qatar. He is at the World Cup and he is covering it every little bit right now. He is not putting out any news or anything. I'm sure that will come when he has a chance to actually compile everything. Right now, he's just enjoying it as he should. His team, Ecuador, won their first game over the host. So he's obviously having a great time. Please follow his journey out there. I am having a really really good time following it from afar. It is a bit of FOMO, although I'll be honest, it's Qatar is also not the first World Cup that I would want to travel to go to. So
Yes,
it is once in a lifetime, but I'll let Carlos be the correspondent abroad here.
I'm extremely happy for Carlos, who I've known from Rowdies games since he was like a high school kid, and I was telling him to tell his teacher that I said it was okay to miss a test because of a Rowdies game.
Yeah.
To have this chance now to get through that, and it didn't even hit me at first that he was going to go see Ecuador, which is like his heritage, and like that's really cool. Hopefully he's allowed to come back to the United States and we can see him at Outlaying next year.
Hopefully, we're gonna cross our fingers. Well, as long as you said before we started recording, as long as he doesn't end up mixed up with Grant Wall, then he should be okay.
Just don't say hi to Grant Wall and you'll be fine.
Yeah. The next thing is also related to the World Cup. On this Friday, Black Friday, the U.S. plays England in the World Cup at 2 p.m. This has the potential to be the most watched soccer game in the history of the United States. Mm-hmm. I am getting everyone I can to join me at McDinton's in Tampa. That seems to be a very good place to go. And I'm just going to say it here. You got to watch this game. I don't know if it's going to be a boring 0-0 draw. I hope not. But I assume there are going to be some level of fireworks. It's usually an interesting game. It's as stupid as the record may seem. With only 2 games played and one of them in 1950, we still have not lost to England at a World Cup.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Just as long as it's not another 6-2 England versus Iran matchup, because that's possible.
No, I hope that is not how it goes. It would be exciting, but not in the right way, obviously. So do tune in, watch that, and if you'd like to swing by McDinton's, I've heard rumors that possibly there will be Rowdies players there. I do not know if that is even real, but maybe Norwich City shows up. We'll see who actually swings through. It is going to be packed one way or another. So definitely try and get out and watch the game. The last thing I want to say,
fight the Norwich players, please.
Yes, exactly. Don't do that. They are still in the middle of their season. We don't need to be responsible for that. The last thing I want to say is just a thank you to Matt. You have been on this podcast tonight, which is helping us out because Carlos isn't here. But not only that, you are obviously a well-versed host for a Rowdies podcast, the Unused Substitutes, that I started listening to. I've said this a couple of times. I was, a casual fan leading up until 2020. I really wanted to get into the team and start supporting my local soccer team a lot more. And I was getting into podcasts a lot more in 2019. So to get ready for that, I was listening to you guys. Unfortunately, 2020 went as it did because of COVID. But you guys were there all the way. You guys were still covering the team. And when I joined RBLR last year, it was with some inspiration from you guys on how to actually do this. And all of you at Unused Substitutes, Matt, you, Stephen, Dan, Jake was there previously. And, I have really valued what you guys do. I know that the show is not going to continue as it was before, but I think all of you guys have been on this show. So we appreciate everything that you've done in no small part just for RBLR, but also everything that you've done previously. It's very awesome. And I'm happy that I've been able to meet you guys, and you're all not, you're not dicks off screen. You're awesome. You're awesome guys.
Well, except for Steven, but we won't talk about that. I appreciate it. Dan and I got into this because literally no one else, not even the local news, was covering the team at all. And to be at a point now where it's, there's multiple podcasts and, I talk with, they're like, basically beat writers for local TV and local news. And it's just, it's cool to see that have happened. And it's just kind of one of those, like, this is what we always wanted to see happen. The Rowdies kind of get that same level of attention. Obviously, they're never going to get the same level of attention as like the Bucks, and maybe not the Lightning, but between the Rays buying in and just the increased media attention and fan attention in general, it's been fun to watch this team grow and glad to have more people around. So that someone can get a better opinion and better thoughts than what they would get listening to us for years.
Yeah, I think I heard Dan say on one of the final podcasts you guys did that he wanted to, in this space that you guys had at Unused, he wanted to just leave things better than they were when you started it. And I can say, as someone who is outside and looking in it into what you guys have done, it definitely is better than at any point previously, with all of the work that you guys have done. And it's been you guys leading that. I think very similar is a little anecdote that I heard on a different podcast that I listened to. It was covering the World Cup, and it was a lead-in, and it was a Canadian journalist who was talking about the Canadian presence. And he was at a press conference after the Canada-Japan friendly that led into the World Cup. In there were 3 Canadian journalists and 150 Japanese journalists. He was talking about the disparity there, and how it's just crazy that there's so little coverage effectively for Canada. And with 3 journalists at the press conference, I realized that the Rowdies have similar coverage to the Canadian men's national team, and I'm sure that is in no small part down. Our press conferences with the Rowdies are similar to that. It's partially down, at the very least, to what you guys have done at Unused Substitutes to make sure that there are as many people covering the Rowdies just on their pregame podcasts as there are for the entire Canadian men's national team.
Well, being half Canadian, I appreciate that also.
Yeah, it was a fun little anecdote, and at the time it did just remind me of what we're doing, because I see you guys obviously every week, and it's cool that there is this journalist post, so to speak. But yeah, I do really thank you guys for doing what you have done, and for being so nice along the way. But thank you, Matt. Thank you, Dan and Steven, listening, if you are. And I want to also say now, thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We have gone extra long today, but hey, we got to cover a whole season, right? It's going to take a little while, of course. Please follow RBLR Sports if you can on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We are at RBLR Sports. I am also on Twitter at RBLR James K, while Twitter is still going, I guess. Matt, where could they get at you on there?
I'm still at unsub_Matt. I'm never giving up the underscore as long as Twitter still exists. And I'm somewhere on Mastodon, but I couldn't tell you what that name is. But it's in my profile name somewhere, I believe.
Yeah, I haven't quite figured out the Mastodon switch yet, so I can't advertise myself there. But please also like and subscribe to our podcast. We are on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and all major podcast platforms. Now, for the season recap and for all the shows to come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.